let's dive in. So, thank you for joining. Welcome up. If you have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat. There's a little chat to the side of the call, or you could put it in general chat. You could ping somebody. If you're listening to this recording and you have a question and you want to also get that answered, feel free to ask it in the Discord or ping. Same thing. Today we're going to discuss a bit about builders in the Morpheus ecosystem. I think spaced, what spaces is probably a good example that we can talk about where they're using the Morpheus contracts to build. So maybe we could use that as an example, but want to just go over a few of these things and get some kind of clear understanding. Last time we spoke about compute providers, about running nodes. What does that look like? What is the situation around testing it? When could we expect it on mainnet? And today, another component of the Morpheus ecosystem is the app builders. And so, David, I wanted to know if you can just give us a general overview of like who will be these app builders and how is that role different or in what ways similar to all the other roles we spoke about, like code providers, capital providers, or compute providers. What does the app builder do that's special to them?
Sure. So happy to talk about that. This is actually one of the things that got me most excited when I first read the Morpheus white paper is how much focus there was on rewarding developers and builders that were actually going to create the smart agents, right? I mean, the whole point of Morpheus is to give builders access to capital, code, and compute, right? Fund the open source they want to build, give them the tools to build it, and then the compute to actually deploy it into the real world. So in my mind, the builders rewards are really where the rubber meets the road with Morpheus, right? And you sort of need the other three buckets to already be live and in production in order to bring the builder one live, right? So obviously code and compute went live first. We talked a couple weeks about uh, the compute bucket and what that looks like. So really sort of the crown jewel, the last big piece is the builder one. And it's sort of an interesting question, like who is a builder? It's really up to the community, right? If you look at the papers that have been written so far, you know, people will be able to stake their Morpheus tokens toward a builder, right? And say, hey, this is something that I think is an important project. I want to support it, right? And the protocol takes that into account and divvies out the proportionality of the rewards based on more staking, right? So it's similar to compute in the sense that you need more tokens to participate in this part of the protocol, right? You need staked ETH to participate in capital. You need to contribute code to participate in code. But in the case of both compute and builders, you actually need the more token to economically align everybody in that. Um, so that's sort of the high level is like any builder that wants to create an interface, an application, a smart agent, something you brought up noun space would probably be a great example, right? They're building these beautiful interfaces for smart agents and non-fungible agents as part of their Farcaster client, right? And so you can think that of that as a front end to Morpheus, the same way that Venice and what they've built is such a beautiful front end for people using large language models or creating images with diffusion models on Morpheus. When that connects into the compute router, right, it effectively gives people an easy way to use Morpheus as an end user. So Venice would be another great example of somebody that I think of as like a builder in the Morpheus community. Um, but to kind of get a little more into the weeds, you know, you got to think beyond just the staking function, right? Because Morpheus is permissionless. There's no whitelist, right? There's nobody handing out permission for who gets to earn builder rewards. Well, then how do you prevent self-staking where somebody pretends to be a builder and they're really just staking towards their own address, right? And taking emissions away from real builders. And so if you look at the original white paper, it sort of had some high level language about using on-chain fees as a way to tell if somebody's really a builder or not. Because if they're really a builder, they should be generating, you know, Morpheus transaction fees for compute, right? Or for the capital contracts they're using, right? There's different ways you could track the real usage of Morpheus based on-chain fees, right? Because they cost something, you can't fake them, you know. And as long as the fee is higher than the reward, nobody's just going to arbitrarily try to run that loop and gather the rewards to themselves without really having a real customer that's actually paying for a service and that is, putting those fees towards the protocol. So the way that Builder Rewards is coming together is sort of looking at a combination of staking more and then looking at the on-chain activity to figure out which projects are real and then heavily weight the rewards towards those projects that are creating those on-chain fees that you can see the usage on-chain, right? So yeah, a lot of pieces, kind of just give people the TLDR. The smart contracts have been under development for a while. They went into audits recently, probably another week or two of audits, but they're getting pretty close to, sort of finishing up that process. So now there's a version of the builder contract, just the basic one with the staking enabled on Sepolia. So if you want to check it out on testnet, I think there's been some links posted in the different channels here on Discord. Definitely check it out, try it out, test it out. But I know there's a ton of projects that are lining up that want to use the Builder Awards as a cool way to align their community and the people in Morpheus to support their projects. So yeah, I'll just stop right there. But that's sort of the high level of where it's at and what it's all about.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, and you definitely touched on a lot of points that I want to take some time to break down. But that is a very good TLDR. Let's imagine, for example, someone wants to build, and also, I guess before that, someone who writes code. I mean, a builder is also writing code. So there could be instances where people are participating in many parts of the ecosystem. Like we could also be providing capital. So the line of what kind of role someone can come in and participate is also blurred. You can write code for the smart contracts, and you can also build stuff with that same code. That's possible. But let's say, for example, a builder is some kind of a decentralized exchange wants to come build and use these smart contracts, right? They are going to have some code, they're going to have some interface, they're going to have some DApp, and they have something they want to build similar to Spaces, or Venice. They have some service that people can use, they have something going on. And what would the process be for that person or that crew or whoever's going to be maintaining that, to like deploy, to start interacting with the contracts, and the process of also people staking them more? Like, are they going to have to say, hey, we have this project out, if you think it's cool, like, go ahead and stake to us? Because the protocol, these rewards, is the protocol trying to incentivize builders to come, correct? In the same way that it's incentivizing capital to come, it's incentivizing code to come, it's incentivizing compute. That's what that reward system is, right? And
Yep.
that's what would that process be for someone building a DEX, let's say, want to plug into those smart contracts?
Yeah, no, that's a really good description. Um, and just to draw the line, the code bucket is about supporting the reference implementations, right? So the open source version of the smart contracts and the smart agents and the node software, like there are 10 different reference implementations in Morpheus. And so that's where the code rewards going are. So anything outside of a reference implementation, right, that would be under the builders bucket, right? So it's any third party group that, like you're saying, wants to build, a DEX integration or an interface or a website or a DApp or deploy a smart agent on Morpheus would be in that builder bucket. And the process is fairly straightforward. If you look at the test contract on Sepolia, basically there's a process where you can create an address. You're effectively registering on a decentralized registry an address and say, hey, I'm a builder. People can stake towards my address here. And then the contract is just looking at those addresses and comparing how much more is staked to each address, right? And then how long the builders are, doing their reward staking, right? So there's reward staking where you can go up the time curve and say, hey, I'm a long-term builder. I'm going to be here for, a year, 2 years, whatever, and I want to increase my rewards by doing my reward staking. So you're going to be able to do that in builders just like you do that today in capital or the code bucket, right? So the first part of the equation is how much more is staked. The second part of the equation is how long is the person willing to stake their rewards? And then the third piece is what's the on-chain fees that the protocol can see that are actually being generated by this activity. So let's take a simple example. You know, um, Venice is using the compute router for inference on Morpheus. Cool. Now you can see how much compute they're using, right? How much more they're staking for the purpose of accessing compute, right? You can look at those metrics and see, oh, wow, Venice has got a ton of users. I think they just crossed 100,000 people that have used Venice, right? And so they're on this incredible growth trajectory, right? They're generating a bunch of usage of the Morpheus protocol itself, right? So that's the third part of that formula that gets included. So that's sort of an easy way to think about it is like you said, attracting people to stake towards your project, showing that you're a long-term builder with your reward staking, and then how much actual usage of the protocol can you generate. And it's a competition, right? It's a free market, right? The end of the day, everybody wins if there's a ton of great builders all competing to build as many cool apps on Morpheus as possible and build as much real usage of Morpheus as possible, right? And that's really refreshing. I haven't seen a protocol, I've said this a few times before, I haven't seen a protocol really since Ethereum that took so seriously the idea of rewarding developers, not just capital, not just compute, which are typically the buckets people overweight on. But I really liked that the white paper had this balance, right, of the four pillars that you needed, and that builders was one of those. So yeah, still plenty of testing and work to do. The most detailed part is really fine tuning how you track the fees and the protocol usage so somebody can't game the system, right? And that's sort of where the process is at right now. It's trying to figure out all those edge cases.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up about needing to support and have a community of builders because that's what really takes a chain to the next level. And it's really nice to have some TVL, to have some stuff going on, to have computers running and provide it. But if all that isn't geared towards something others can use, like an app or this is why we need the builders, then that stuff's just kind of spinning in circles. And I want to ask actually on that note about like staking. Let's say Venice is going, good example, we can see it right now. And I stake some more there. Now, does the reward system say is this kind of like us voting to say the in previously in capital we're staking and we're getting more tokens back in code, we're providing code and getting more tokens. Is the building dynamic more set up like a voting mechanism, or is it also if Venice is getting a certain amount of tokens from the protocol because it is verifiably doing these transactions, like we can verify that it's not spoofing something. We're seeing the on chain, we're seeing the inference that is pulling from the computes. Now I had a certain amount of more tokens take there. Is there a benefit of me getting some of that distribution as well, or is it me more voting like, okay, this is a valid project. I know that this is going to contribute to the growth of the ecosystem, and that's why I'm voting. What is for the user who is maybe not a builder, let's say, what is their how may they choose which projects to vote on or to stake on?
I think about it less as voting and more like owning the more token gives you superpowers, right? And the superpower is the pro account on Venice, right? It's early
Right.
access to features on Noun Space, right? It's access to all these incredible smart agents because think about Venice's incentive. right? Whether they want you to stake towards their compute contract or stake towards their builder's contract, they're getting low cost inference, right? And that's like their biggest cost in their business by far, right? Is actually the compute, right? It's accessing the models. So if their users can bring that resource, they can bring them access to compute, totally makes sense that they're giving people a free pro account. If they have today, they just check if you have a Morpheus token in your wallet and they give you a pro account, but they're obviously going to upgrade that to check if you're staking right towards compute or their builder rewards, because that benefits their access to cheap compute, right? And that's really going to drive their model because they want to offer free AI even without an account, right? And give huge number of people access, and to do that, you really have to have super low cost access to the models, right? So Morpheus for them is an incredible way to bootstrap all those users, right, into using the service, trying it out, and getting to the point where they want to upgrade. So yeah, for me, I think about holding more tokens. That's my access to Venice and all these other cool applications. So as you see dozens or hundreds or eventually thousands of applications on Morpheus, like I can use my more, and it leaves it up to every project to decide how to reward their users, right? So Morpheus itself is agnostic, right? It doesn't force the builder to use any particular defaults, right? You can reward your users however the hell you want, right? Morpheus doesn't care. Whatever attracts them, if it's a pro account, if it's API credits, like whatever you want to build. And the cool thing about that is it creates a free market, right? And people are going to experiment with a bunch of different approaches. And I'm very confident, the free market comes up with good solutions because people can run all these experiments and figure out what attracts the most people to stake towards their projects. So it'll be really interesting to see, but we can already see the prime example of something like Venice, where they're giving out pro accounts and access, and it makes total sense for their use case.
I see. So, in the similar way that Venice is checking the wallet for a more token, the user staking more towards a builder is that process, but formalized in smart contracts.
Yep,
Okay,
exactly.
that makes
Yep.
sense. And Trader Rage has well, Trader Rage and Mindful have a good question, and I want to get into actually. You brought up this idea of self staking. Like, let's say I make some random bot and it looks like it's doing something on chain, but really I'm just trying to capitalize on some of these tokens that the protocol is giving out to incentivize on builders. They're not building anything. Trade Rage, he says, that's a pretty smart idea of making the fees as one of these factors, so it making exploiting it more difficult. Mindful
Yep.
missed that point. What were the fees about? So could you go dive, maybe like if you don't mind taking some time discussing what some ideas are floating around about this security of verifying, okay, this isn't just a bot with 500 contracts that it made and it's making it look like activity. There's obviously a cost as we're using examples like Venice to to gather the inference, to use the computing power. There's a cost, and what is the relationship between the cost of interacting with the Morpheus contracts and what Trade Rage is discussing about fees and how that could potentially help prevent fraudulent activity happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, there's a good reference in the Morpheus white paper to using on-chain fees. And the way that's getting written into the smart contracts now is, let's take a look at the compute bucket, right? In order to offer compute, you have to stake more tokens. Well, the rewards, like on an annual basis, are less more than you had to stake, right? So you can't run an infinite loop, because let's say you bought, $1,000 of more tokens, and over a year you earned $500, right? You're only going to do that if you have a real customer that's actually paying for your compute, and so you're getting a return, right? Otherwise, you locked up more value than you could get back just from usage of the protocol. And if it's your $500, then it didn't make any sense, right? So you just have to make it economically um costly, and all the fake players flow out, and it only leaves the real players, right? So it's the same thing in the builders bucket. You know, if you say, okay, cool, people stake towards me, X amount is locked up, and I can earn, let's say 50% of that locked amount, just like I can in the compute context. Great. That's huge profit for me if they're a real customer, right? Because it's somebody else's money is paying for the service. But if you're trying to fake it, right, you're using your own money to trade, you're trading a dollar for 50 cents, right? And nobody's going to trade a dollar for 50 cents, right? So if it's fake, it just gets washed out because of the economics.
Thank you for that clarification and good question, Mindful. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat, or we got a nice sized group, so you can also raise your hand and come up. I'm gonna turn on the ability to. Oh yeah, you can ask questions. Good question about the fees, and it's always these kind of dynamics which I've been fascinated with. Everything in Morpheus is thinking of ways so that it can be safe and open. So we want to bring people in, we want to let people explore and test things out, but having those procedures of how can we also prevent spam, prevent like people trying to game the system, which will happen everywhere and all the time. It's like it's very much a part of human nature, but having some kind of guardrails to keep that in check. And so that's a pretty cool idea
Well,
about
well, and if I give a good example, is you want to do what Bitcoin did. You want to reward gaming in a way where it benefits the network. So, people started mining Bitcoin with a CPU, but there's nothing in the protocol that stopped you from using, a graphics card, from using a GPU, right? And go for it, right? That wasn't a bad thing. It just added more and more hash power to the network, right? Eventually, after 4 years, the miners got sophisticated enough that they started building hardware, right? And you had ASICs, right? Dedicated computers that did nothing but mine Bitcoin start to come out in 2013. That was good for the network, right? Because it made it even stronger. It gave it even more hash power. So, the brilliance of Bitcoin and good tokenomics are, gaming the network adds value, not subtracts value. It makes it stronger and more secure, not less secure. Right. So that's really kind of the gold standard when I think about how to build those type of systems.
very good point. We got EM812. Just invite you up to the stage. What's going on, EM?
I'm here. I'm here. Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, coming in good.
Perfect.
What do you?
Perfect. No, yeah, I was the one that wrote. I think it was yesterday that Luke was the one that Luke and actually David Johnston, they both kind of motivated us to then come and experiment with more. So in our case, we just recently, probably about 3 weeks ago, we launched an OpenAI crypto due diligence platform. And by open, I'm not talking about ChatGPT. I'm talking about open AIs like Llama. And so in our case, I mean, it's already built. And so right now we're in the process of decentralizing what we built, so that then we can use more in our system. So I'm trying to understand, right, the economics and how to go about it, so that then we can offer it to everyone. And so we're trying to make sure that anyone in the more community can use it. I mean, it's there to protect all of us, right? So go ahead.
Very cool.
Very good
Thanks
question.
for thanks for what you're
I was someone
building, man.
with an existing protocol that wants to incorporate more.
Sure. Well, and this is a perfect example. Really glad to see people, building out so that they can use open source models, which are a lot cheaper than going and paying Microsoft or Google for their API. They upcharge like 10x on their APIs compared to if you just run Llama 3.1, which is just as good as ChatGPT 4 now, right? The open source models have caught up with the best proprietary models, right? Which is amazing, just in the last few months. So yeah, I'd say the way to start is to test out the compute router. It's on testnet right now. And, think about the models that you want to use, whether it's Llama 3.1 or something else. It looks like there are compute providers for pretty much all the different models that are out there today, right? And so if you're familiar with how to connect to the inference on Morpheus, that'll put you in a good position for as soon as that goes live on mainnet for you to get access to super cheap compute and inference, right? So yeah, just think of it
So,
as better cost alternative.
and what about if I don't know how to connect to to the inference of more?
Oh, no worries. There are like community guides coming out. People are doing videos on how to make the connection. It should be just a matter of downloading the software, right?
Got
There's the Morpheus Lumerin node. So if you go to GitHub right now and you go to the Morpheus AI's uh, um, organization page, you'll see
got it.
the repo for the Morpheus Lumerin node. That's the one you download, and then it just
Okay.
gives you a beautiful user interface, and you can see all the models and what's being offered, and you can test it out. But yeah, people have posted a few good videos of them using the testnet. But give that a try. But the community is super friendly. If you run into any challenges, just pop a question in a Discord. People are always there.
And how's that then the economics works? I mean, so people are going to be staking their more towards
Yep.
using. I mean, if the community finds value right in what we provide, so they're going to be staking their more into this, decentralized, if you want to call it that way, then due diligence platform. And then how is then us as a builder are going to be making money out of this? Is it from the money that's going to be generated by the state more? Is that how it goes?
That's a great question. So you're talking about in the builder rewards context. Morpheus
Correct.
sets aside 24% of the tokens are emitted for the builder rewards. So just like 24% go to capital providers or code providers or compute providers, there's also 24% set aside for the builders. So people are competing. So if people are staking more towards you and people are using your service and it's, counting the on-chain usage, then you'll get part of that 24% of the emissions, right? That's how it's structured. So it's an open market, it's a competition, and based on the proportion, that's how you get rewarded. So yeah, should reward a very interesting, broad, diverse set of builders in the ecosystem.
I think
Thank you. Appreciate it.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Go ahead.
really good.
absolutely.
Thank you for coming up, Em. I think something that could help in how you formulate what exactly you guys want to do and how your group of builders wants to build is the example David gave with Venice is that in the way that it works, it is already asking for some amount of more to participate. And so in the staking, it's not like someone just throws some tokens over there and then hopes the best for you. And I think that was David's point about it's not voting in the same way like a DAO. But if there was a mechanism inside of the app, and tell me if I'm getting this right, if part of the builder's idea of how this thing works is that it uses the token in some way, it uses in the example of Venice, you want a pro account, you have one more token. If there was a DEX, let's say, and they were like, well, if you want to trade, the normal fee is this rate, which is comparable to Uniswap or something. But if you have a certain amount of more tokens, you're like a pro member and you get half the fee. So the protocol builds in a way to kind of attract the usage of more token to benefit the users of that protocol. And that is the system that people will be bringing, and the protocol will look towards, wow, look, this is having a lot of inferences, it's really using the network, and it's bringing in more tokens for whatever useful way that it wants. That is what gets rewarded. Is that making sense? And David, does that sound like a good
That's that's
summary?
a that's 100% a perfect description. Yep.
Awesome, perfect. And David, good to see you over here, buddy. Enrique, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear your voice, my friend. No, it's
Likewise,
cool.
likewise.
I'm really glad that Luke decided to jump into the Morpheus community and help start explaining it to everybody. He's got such a gift for communications.
Yeah, he's right now windsurfing or doing something over there in Peru, but he was telling me yesterday, no, you have to go. I was like, okay, I'm going. So good to see you over here.
Cool.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you too.
Very cool.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Em, for coming up. Again, if anybody has a question or something they're, investigating and you want to come up and ask, feel free to raise your hand, or you could also type it in the chat. I think we got a lot of interesting points brought up about this, and I wanted to speak a little bit about the distribution of this token of the builder reward. So you say that there'd be 24% set aside, and we've kind of seen this mechanism happening with the capital, with the code. Soon we're going to see with compute. What is that process of that being distributed? Is it once a week? It's evaluating and saying this is that proportionality. Is it every couple of weeks, every month? What is the process for someone who is, let's say, they are a builder, they need some support in what they're building, they need to, pay for some infrastructure, some servers, this and that. How exactly does that reward distribution work?
That's a great question. And it's actually a little bit different than something like capital, right? Because the capital aspects happen on Ethereum. But once you claim a More token, right, it might be on Arbitrum or Base or something like that, right? And so you need to actually do the logic on the layer two, not on Ethereum, right? So the More tokens set aside for the builder rewards right now are just sitting in the contract, right, until it goes live, accruing every day, waiting for it to go live, right? Okay. Well, when it goes live, then probably my guess would be once a month, there'll be a claim function that moves it from the claim on Ethereum to the tokens pop into existence into the builder contract on Arbitrum or Base, right? And then from there, it runs the proportionality logic and says, oh, okay, for this month, here's the amount of staked, here's the amount of on-chain activity, here's the proportionality of all the builder addresses, send out rewards, right? So it'll kind of look more like something like code, right? Where people are used to a monthly snapshot where new weights get included in the proportionality rewards for code. So that's probably a good type of reasonable cadence is every 30 days, right? Once a month, the logic gets run. And that way you're not creating a bunch of gas fees, running it all the time, and for most people, that's sort of a good cadence for most businesses and companies and projects do things on a monthly basis, right? So that'd be my expectation, but it's sort of a two-step. First, the tokens have to be transferred to the contract on Arbitrum or Base, and then they have to be distributed to all the people that earn them.
Yeah, that's a good distinction, similar to how code, because capital is something that's moving more frequently, so it makes sense for it to be reflected more often. And the idea of a builder sticking around and having, some kind of stake is that it happens less. And I think that's what's cool about code providers too. And there's even been metrics shared about like how much the code providers are staking, and it's much higher than the capital providers, basically saying, "Hey, we're sticking around. It's not something that moves as frequently, and capital maybe trying to find a better benefit somewhere else, so it's moving frequently." That makes sense for the builder bucket. I do want
Yeah,
to. Yeah.
and,
Did
and
you have
just
anything
just
you want
to
to add?
just to riff on that for a second, I've been amazed by sort of like the diamond hands on the coding community. I mean, I saw the statistics the other day. Somebody in Discord created these nice pie charts, and like more than 20% of the coding rewards are staked for like 4 to 6 years, and then there was like another 30% were more than 4 years, and then like another 20% it was more than 2 to 4 years, right? And so something like 70 or 80% of all the code rewards, I think now at this point are staked for a long period of time. And I think just reflects, there's a very serious community of early crypto people that one, are passionate about the project and are going to be building it for years to come. But two, like I see it as a benefit that I can do staking, then I'm not tempted to touch my rewards. Like if I could have done that with Bitcoin back in 2012, that would have been awesome. Like that technology didn't exist, right? There's no unlock time, there's no smart contracts and stuff like that. But man, that would have been awesome, right? So, I tend to think, there's a huge correlation between the success of a project and how serious its contributors are, right? And I tend to, think, serious projects take years to build, and end up, really having a big impact, if you take that approach instead of like, you know, thinking about something in a 2 week or 4 week type of cycle. But I continue to see more staked ETH coming in as well. I see that's over 66,000 staked ETH, and it seems like the demographic is shifting consistently to more and more people doing the reward staking. So, as people discover it and, they see the benefit, I think we'll see the same type of thing evolve. There's just a much larger group in capital of thousands of people instead of, 300 addresses for code. It takes longer to propagate that information.
Yeah, thank you for that, and good explanation. Um, about the, and we're gonna head down the call. So if you do have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand. If you're listening to this recording, put it in general, bring it up. Someone's gonna be able to help you out. What would you say are ways that once this infrastructure is in place and kind of the system, there's tutorials, for example, someone like EM can come up and say, I've built this thing, I want to plug it into more, here's how I do it, here's how it works. When this is more solidified and as the rest of the contracts get solidified, what are some things that could happen to attract builders? I think there's different people in the community at different different events and different discussions around crypto throughout the world going on. If you're paying attention to the announcement channel, there's a bunch of different stuff like this, conferences. That's what the word is. So, what are some things that perhaps could happen and everyone could participate in a way to encourage builders to come check it out to see if it's useful for them? What are some things that could happen to attract these builders?
That's a really great question. Number one thing I tell people is just show up, right? Go to a Morpheus meetup in your area. Go to one of these decentralized AI days. I mean, there's already been one in San Francisco, Austin, Denver, London, Brussels. Just had a ton of events in Korea. Next one's going to be in Singapore, right? There's been one in San Juan, all over the place. I mean, people are popping up meetups in India and Ukraine, all over the world. And so that's the number one way to get up the learning curve, is just meet people in person that really know the tech, right? And can answer your questions. I think it'd be really cool to do a dedicated Austin Builders Week next spring. 'Cause I think Consensus is moving to a different city next year because the convention center is under renovation or something like that. But there's sort of a lot of the technology people related to AI seem to be moving into Austin. I don't know if you saw, but California actually went through with it and passed that crazy ban on open source. It passed the legislature, so the last step is for the governor to sign it, and he's got to do it during September. So it's like, you know, be paying attention to what's going on, the restrictions that are happening, and find some place that's friendly, right? Go where you have to do to build. That's sort of what I see out of serious builders. Like, it's like back in the 90s or 2000s when people moved to Silicon Valley. Now people are moving to Austin or Singapore or, Dubai or Switzerland. Like, go where you can actually build this tech, and you'll find a really incredible community of people. So, I mean, that's where I met everybody in Bitcoin, was going to Bitcoin meetups in 2013, right? It was the same for Ethereum in 2014, 2015, right? Go and hack with people in person. So, there's a lot of Morpheus meetups starting to come together. And there's a whole guide on GitHub. Just search for meetups, and you can check out the guide. You can host one in your own city.
Nice. A question came up, and I think we can end with this one. Is we've heard a lot about how the process will be for a builder to get rewarded, why the protocol wants to reward those builders, how someone who just wants to use something, who's maybe doesn't know code language, just wants to participate, for example, Spaces in Venice and the benefits they can get. And you mentioned about the test net, the contracts are being audited. What is kind of, and Platonic's question is like, when could this launch? what has it been getting the audits and testing out the contracts? Is there a kind of amount of steps left, and how does it look? I think this also is dependent on the compute nodes being up and running, I assume. So
Right.
how does all that feel, and like what could be a potential for us starting to get our hands or builders starting to be on mainnet and doing this kind of stuff?
It's a great question. It's definitely the most complex of the smart contracts are compute and builders, and they're really tightly interrelated, right? Because like you said, you need compute to be live to then see those on-chain metrics, right? To tell who's actually using the protocol and, using on-chain fees and stuff like that, right? So yeah, you got to have compute live, right? And that router is a lot more complex than something like the capital contracts, which are, straightforward in the sense that they just look at, capital amounts and dole out rewards, right? And you don't have to take all these edge cases into account. So yeah, and Morpheus has been the whole community has been really good about audits. You know, a lot of these contracts have now been audited, two, three, four, 5 times as like some new part gets added, it gets, reviewed again. And I think that's really healthy. And I think that's really smart way to do it. So I'd rather see it ship correctly than get rushed. And that's sort of why Morpheus community has never really had magic dates. Like there's no team, right? There's no central coordination. There's no foundation, right? So it is ready when it's ready, right? And if people want to move that process forward, jump in, right? Help with the testing, help with the auditing. That's the biggest thing that can really sort of move it forward is people trying it out and giving feedback on where it's at. But so I don't want to throw out a date, but I think it's driven by the testing and it's driven by this audit process. But I feel good about the progress that's been made. I mean, you can see the compute router is working right now, right in testnet. You can see the staking version of the builder rewards is working right now in testnet. So it's about getting it really solid where you're accounting for those edge cases. But there's a lot of people working really hard to see it become reality sooner than later. So, you want to make it move faster, jump in.
Yeah, that's a great part of the Morpheus ethos, which I do appreciate. If you really want to speed it up and you feel like you have the skills, instead of just saying when, get involved. And I wish that it was possible in more protocols, in other protocols, to get more involved other than, hey, I bought the token, now I'm chilling. That here it's cool to see so many different aspects that you can get involved in. So
Sure.
good point about like overall this is what the community should be about, getting in there. If you can lend a hand, lend a hand. And
And it doesn't just have to be, coding. There's a ton of
right.
stuff that will be helpful to put in place before builder awards go live. So, for example, I just threw up a community website a few days ago, and I started going through all the projects that have come out to the decentralized AI days and be like, hey, do you guys want to do this builder awards thing? Right. And so I threw up more.builders, right? MOR.builders. And you'll see like those are a bunch of the projects that have shown up to the decentralized AI events, right? It's like, cool, let's start telling them this is coming, how they can participate, you know, to think through the rewards they want to give their users, to stake towards them. And people have been amazingly responsive, and so if you click through, you can see different examples of what people have said that they want to reward their stakers with, right? Their users. And so, yeah, just kind of building up all of that information so I can actually see, here are all the projects, here's what they're doing, you know. Um, I went out and for friends, I registered a bunch of base addresses because that's really blown up the usage of base the last few months. And, kind of just helping people onboard, like, okay, cool. Now the more 20 contracts have been extended to base, here, let me shoot you over a base name so you can, have an address there and integrate that with what you want to do. So, all that kind of stuff, if builders, start getting them familiar with the process so that they can be savvy on it for when it launches, right? And it takes time to do all of that. So yeah, definitely, definitely check that out. If you guys have suggestions, hit me up on Discord and I can update the site with other builders. If I've missed anybody, by all means. I found 3,000 people have attended all the different decentralized AI events globally. And out of that, I was able to curate like a list of like 200 projects. And the ones up on more.builders right now are the 40 or whatever that I've managed to reach out to and, get their logo and stuff that they want to, check it out or be involved or offer rewards or stuff like that. So, but I'm sure I've missed a ton of people. So shoot me recommendations.
Solid. Thank you for being up here and providing your time and discussing all these different topics. There's so many in-depth topics around more, and it's cool to just have some time to break it down and talk simply about it. I want to open the stage up for Mystic Marks if you want to say anything. Maxwell, if you want to share any of your thoughts around app building. You have some time. If anybody has a question, feel free to throw it in the chat as we wrap up.
Thank you. Love listening to David discuss this. The one thing to take away, or a couple things to take away, in my opinion, is that if we had to look at this experience of evolving Morpheus into the universe as a very still pond, and we threw a huge watermelon into it, when this builder thing happens, that is the first ripple that comes out of that event. And it is going to be incredible to see how this thing just moves in every direction at the same time. I am also as excited about this being a new payment method for app developers to use. If we take a look at the current subscription process, it puts the onus on the user to revoke their payment if they are unhappy with a trial period. This is a far gentler approach to accomplish the exact same thing. And that friction and gentle interaction is going to make the stickiness of a subscription, in my opinion, be much greater for a much longer time. So if we take anything out of that, that is what really makes me tingle. That's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that description. It's like a rebirth of the App Store minus the 30% to Apple. For developers, that's pretty sweet.
Mystic, you want to mention anything? EM saying this, you guys got some project dual Q. If you're trying to speak, I can't hear you at least. I don't know if anybody else can. Your mic is unmuted though.
You might have had to step away.
Mystic. All right. Well, again. Oh, yeah, maybe. Oh, let's try. He's trying to get back in. Yeah, come back up here. Let's see. There we go. Okay.
Mic check.
Hey, there we
There
go.
he is.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. As you guys made good points. The connective tissue is coming. I mean, when compute providers are going to be able to provide compute for things like protein folding, animation training, movie production, for running 2-frame movie reels on AI, that's all stuff that is going to be at scale and various too. So different people will be able to host more of that level of compute. So it's a healthy infrastructure for everybody to try and do business in. Because whether you have a massive server farm or you have a small amount of compute, there's going to be something that eventually is going to want to consume those resources, because there's not going to always be available resources. The big guys are going to be able to provide for those that can pay the premium and service them at 10,000 instances of something. All right, so that's all things to bear in mind when you're building and when you're servicing for compute, is to prepare for those stacks of virtualized processes. For instance, when AI, people don't always think generative is dynamic. So, for instance, if you queue with any model and you talk in context of invention or new creations, new and novel ideas, you're going to get a response. but that has a vector space with a lot of search results that are available. Most people see the regen as it was an error, but really you're exploring that vector space, okay? When you can run 10,000 instances with one person and then have that all output in one file, you're going to be able to see a lot more results quicker. So is that worth compute for people? Yes, it is. Because you sitting there pushing the button 10,000 times is not going to happen. These are going to matter for people that are innovators. So those are just great things to keep in mind with how this compute is going to be pushed forward and how quickly it will get consumed.
Well said. Cool.
Fair
And
enough.
appreciate
Thank
you hosting the space, Helios. This is great. Glad we've been doing this every couple of weeks.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's just really cool to see to break down basically all the stuff that has been given in kind of a very, very dense and like thorough way in the white paper and other documents, and to really parse it out and see so that people can realize, okay, this is how I could participate. Like even being here and joining these calls, I've been able to find out more about where could I fit in, how could I fit in, what can I contribute in my own way. And yes, I don't have this skill or that skill, but I can start to see and get a picture of what is something that because I am passionate about Morpheus and what's going on, how do I contribute the way I can, which is really cool. And it's super cool because I'm like totally not in the tech world, but I feel very welcomed, by the community, and feel like I can contribute something. And that's really cool. And so it's been nice having these calls, and I hope others that are listening to this remotely, or those who joined us today, can also start to imagine ways like, what is it about crypto that you like? What is it about AI that you like? What is it about any of these infrastructures, about open information that you like? And find your own way to imagine and make it work. And all the, you basically have a whole family of friends that are willing to figure it out, chop it up, discuss it, just like EM coming up here, having his already built program and saying, where could this plug in? How do I make this happen? So it's been really rewarding. So I do thank everybody for coming up. I thank everybody for coming out and spending your time listening to us. If you're listening on the recordings, again, drop a question in general chat or in some of the specific channels. We have a builders channel. So if there's something you need help with or some assistance, also check out the GitHub. You can hit up the Twitter, but a lot of live conversation is going to go down in the Discord. So thank you again. If anybody had any last comments, we are going to wrap it up. So I'll leave the floor open for just a second.
All good for me. Thanks, guys.
Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll catch you on the next call. Keep being
See you
awesome
guys.
out there. Enjoy the weekend.
Yep, you too. Take care.